Hello everyone, today we're going to do a little winter pruning on some of my fruit trees. So I wanted to bring you along and really show you what that winter pruning process looks like, explain to you what the benefits are. So come on along as we do some late winter, it's already early March, but we do some late winter pruning on the food forest. Alright, so before we get to pruning, the first thing I'm going to do, I got myself some new garden clippers, shears, whatever you want to call them. Between each plant, we're just going to spray with some alcohol just to make sure we're killing any bacteria and we're not spreading any disease. All right, so these pear trees have been in the ground for, man, I want to say 3 years. This will be the third year. And I got them at a big box store. So these are one of the first things that I actually planted in my yard. Probably would have got them from a local nursery, but hey, they've been growing really well. It's kind of interesting. The first year that I had them, they produced pears. The second year, which was last year, they did not, and this one in particular did not grow very much. So I'm curious to see what this third year brings. But pruning pear trees is super easy. So the first thing that I do when I'm pruning in the winter is I think, what do I want for my pear tree? Do I want them to be as big as possible? Do I want them to be small? Do I want them to be wide? That's how I'm going to prune them. As you can see, I have lots of other plants here. I'm going to be planting more this year, but I have grapevines. I have plants back here that I don't want to be shaded. I'm going to have plants here that I don't want to be shaded. So what I'm going to do is I am training this to not be a giant tree, okay? So that's kind of my first thought going into the pruning process. The second thing that I am going to keep in mind is I want space and air and sunlight in my tree. Right? So you can see I've done a pretty good job of that. There's not a lot that will be crossing each other, but we're going to keep that in mind as we start pruning. Another thing that we're going to keep in mind is the general shape of a pear tree. So I can't remember the terminology, and that's okay, because as hobby gardeners, we have a lot to keep in mind, but you want on a pear tree kind of a single shoot, a single stem coming up, and then you want a nice cone shape all around that. There are different techniques that you may want for an apple per se, where it's more of a hollowed out middle and a cone shape. From what I've researched, that's not particularly what you want with the pear, so I'm also going to be keeping that in mind. I've also heard that you shouldn't take back more than 20% off of a pear tree when you're doing a winter pruning. Some other varieties of fruits like apples or what have you, they can stand a little bit more to be taken off, but pear trees don't like that too much. So let's just start here. All right, so we're zoomed in a little bit, but again, I just wanted to give you more of a close-up. So as you can see, we're doing pretty good on spacing. I don't have lots of things that are crossing, which is great. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take some of this stuff down just a bit. The more you prune, the less the plant has to worry about and gets to focus on new growth, right? So pruning is super important. So really at an angle, I'm just gonna come here and we're gonna prune that off. And we're gonna kind of look here. I'm gonna say, hey, this one's not really serving exactly the way that I want it. We're just gonna prune this all the way back here. All right, so there's a little bit more space and sunlight. So it looks like this one here, and hopefully you can see that okay, will eventually kind of be coming up into this one, and I don't want that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find a bud that's gonna be kind of going out more away from the body of the tree, and I'm just gonna prune it right back to that. And then at the very top, there's a lot of new growth, but I don't want this tree getting too tall, so I'm actually gonna prune back on some of this new growth. We're gonna prune it back to, prune this back here. And we're gonna prune this back just down a little bit there. And I'm just gonna kind of walk around and see. All right, looks like I don't have anything that's gonna be crossing. We took a little bit off the top. We're good to go on this one. All right, so you can see here, I left buds growing out, not the buds growing in. I want to encourage growth out and wide, not in and up. So this is my other pear tree, and this pear tree has grown a lot better, more vigorously than the other. So we're gonna do a little bit more pruning on this one. And this one's also leaning a little bit too. We had a really bad windstorm a couple years ago. By the way, I planted both of these at the same time, so we're going into our 3rd year here with this one. But we had a really bad windstorm. It pulled it really down far, and now it's leaning. So I'm gonna have to prop this one up this year to get it growing kind of vertically like I want to again. But you can see this one's a lot taller. This one's a lot wider. So we're gonna probably take a little bit more off of this. But again, with the same thing in mind, I don't want anything crossing too much. And I'm also thinking with this tree here, there's a lot more growth on this side of the tree than there is on this side of the tree. So I'm going to keep that in mind as I'm pruning. So the first thing that I'm going to do is look into anything that's crossing. And honestly, there's not a lot, which is great. With the thought in mind that there's not too much on this side of the tree, but that there's a lot on this side of the tree, I'm actually going to take this whole section off. This little bud here is very much growing toward the center and will be crossing. I'm going to take that away. These little buds here, there's no need for those. I'm going to take that away. You can see I have this nice main stem, probably using the wrong terminology, but I have this nice main stem going up, and I don't have a lot that's crossing, right? I'm going to get a lot of sunlight here, so this is looking really good. I'm also going to kind of take a little bit off the tops again because I want to encourage growth wide, not just growth up. So I'm going to take a couple buds off on all of the big stems that I have, and I'm going to leave buds that are pointing out. All right, and you can see this is all new growth here on this one. And again, I want to encourage not high but wide. So we're going to actually take this down quite a bit. And as I'm trimming at an angle, right next to a bud. And the reason why you trim at an angle is when rain starts coming down on these trimmings, it doesn't just rest and create rotten disease. It will, because it's at an angle, that'll run off. So that's what we're trying to encourage. Okay, and that pretty much wraps up the trimming and the pruning that I wanted to do on the pear tree. One thing to keep in mind is that, yes, you want to be knowledgeable about what you're doing. And we want to understand that pruning and trimming is so important for fruit trees, and I've seen that here over the past few years. But you don't need to overthink it, right? I took some off the top. I want to encourage wide growth, and that's pretty much it. I don't want anything crossing, and I want lots of air. So I trimmed it down. We'll see how it does this year, and we'll iterate and change the way we do it probably next year after we learn from this year.